My name is Raji, and today's episode will be about one of the most influential leaders in European history, a man who rose to become one of the most recognizable and powerful leaders of France through military prowess and strategy, a man who shaped, changed, and impacted not only France, but the entire world, but also a man who strongly believed in destiny and the inevitable fate of his successors. This man is none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica, France, a recently established Mediterranean French island. Napoleon was the second-born son of parents Charles and Letizia Bonaparte. Napoleon had 7 other siblings, including an older brother named Joseph and 6 younger siblings. There are many accounts of how Napoleon was actually like during his younger years. But what is consistent is that he was a child who loved fighting and studying, a child who was disruptive and got into squalls and beefs with others, but through all this still dreamed of future days of glory and triumph. At the age of 10, Napoleon and his older brother Joseph continued their studies in France, where they would eventually attend a military school in Brienne, France, called Brienne-la-Château. This school was for boys from aristocratic families like the Bonapartes. At this school, he was bullied for his Corsician accent and was cut off from his family for the entire duration of his time there. But here was where he truly learned a lot about the French people, their culture, and the language, plus subjects like math, history, and music. After finishing school at Brienne at age 15, Napoleon would finally head to Paris to attend one more military school for advanced training and preparation to finally join the military. After spending a year in the Paris military school, learning how to use weapons like artillery cannons and riding horses, Napoleon would finally join the French military in the La Ferre Artillery Regiment as a lieutenant at the age of 16. To understand how Napoleon rose to power in France, we have to understand one of the biggest shifts in the entire political and societal landscape of France at the time, that being the French Revolution. This revolution was caused by France being on the edge of bankruptcy in the late 18th century, around 1789, because of their involvement in the recent American Revolution that established the United States of America as an independent nation, but also because of the French monarchy and King Louis XVI's extravagant spending. This on top of the French people growing tired of the poor living and economic conditions of their country and being inspired by the ideas of liberty, equality, and democracy by the Americans led them to revolt against their own monarchy in an attempt to establish a republic and create a new relationship between the governors and the governed. The two sides of this revolution were the royalists, those who supported the monarchy and wanted to maintain the old power of the king, and the revolutionaries, those who wanted to overthrow the monarchy and create a new government that would represent citizens more, like a republic/democracy. With the French Revolution taking place, many people across the country had to choose what side they would align with, both spelling potential prosecution and even execution. Many in the French military chose to leave in fear of the revolution, and others fought for the royalists, leaving the military depleted of officers and full more of untrained volunteers who were driven by the revolutionaries and the idea of merit-based rankings/promotions rather than noble lineage. This changed the French Royal Army into the French Revolutionary Army. One of the members of this new army would be none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. Throughout the French Revolution, Napoleon supported the revolutionaries. He believed that states should be governed without arbitrary privilege due to royalty, and that the revolution was a victory for logic, reason, and a, quote, manifestation of Enlightenment ideals that he would still believe in. Although he still dispersed early revolutionary riots during his time as an officer, things changed when he returned back to his native island of Corsica. Napoleon and the Bonaparte family would promote and support the revolutionary cause. Napoleon from then on would go in and out of Corsica and mainland France, becoming more and more involved in the revolution. In 1793, Napoleon would eventually be promoted to a brigadier general due to his efforts in the siege of Toulon, in which Napoleon helped capture the city of Toulon and his forces against the royalists. From here, it would only go up for Napoleon. The revolutionaries believed that the revolution and its ideologies needed to spread past France's borders, leading to multiple countries getting involved on top of the infighting within France. Eventually, in 1795, a new form and order of government called the Directory would take power, establishing a new constitution and placing Napoleon as a respected advisor on military matters. But as the Directory held power, it was proven to be a form of government that was no better than the very monarchy it overthrew. The next 4 years of the Directory's hold of power proved to be an utter failure. From weak executive powers, corruption, political infighting, and economic instability, the Directory would eventually be overthrown and betrayed by none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. On November 9th, 1799, a coup d'etat called Coup of 1819 Brumaire, led by General Napoleon Bonaparte, would take place. With the help of his conspirators, including his younger brother Lucien Bonaparte, Napoleon would trick the Directory's legislature to relocate and with the command of the French military, force the resignation of the members of the Directory. This forceful yet bloodless coup d'etat would mark the end of the French Revolution and help Napoleon establish himself as the first consul of France. This self-establishment would make Napoleon the true leader of France and would kick off a 16-year period of war, change, internal conflict, and political division in Europe, known as the Napoleonic Era. Once Napoleon became first consul of France, it was straight to business for the Napoleon-controlled French Republic. In 1800, Napoleon would lead around 28,000 troops in the Battle of Marengo against the Austrians in northern Italy. This narrow victory by the French would result in the French occupation of all of northern Italy west of the Mincio River, making France the dominant power in Europe. This battle also boosted Napoleon's reputation and secured his authority in Paris. But even with all this, Napoleon still needed money to sustain his republic and keep off the British after they broke their truce with France due to Napoleon's increasing power. Because of this, Napoleon had to sell the North American French Louisiana territory to the United States. A year after this, in 1804, Napoleon would kick off what is now known as the First French Empire and the peak of the Napoleonic Era. Napoleon believed that it was France's destiny to dominate all of Europe and to be led by a dynasty that started with Napoleon. Despite supporting the revolutionaries' charge and ideology of a republic, it simply was a means to an end as Napoleon declared France as a hereditary empire and made himself the Emperor of the French, known as Napoleon I. He had also created a new legal system for France called the Napoleonic Code. This civil code would become one of Napoleon's biggest impacts on not only France, but the entire world. It included making several branches of law, making all male citizens equal, and even freedom of religion. This code had some drawbacks as well though, like the bringing back of slavery and the subordination of women and reducing the rights of any illegitimate children. The next few years after the beginning of the First French Empire would truly establish Napoleon as one of the greatest leaders in European history. From 1805 to 1809, Napoleon would engage in a number of land battles, treaties, and economic warfare with enemy nations like Britain. The battles of Ulm, Jena, and the famous Battle of Austerlitz are just to name a few. The Battle of Austerlitz in specific was crucial and truly demonstrated Napoleon's greatness. Using deception and strategic positioning of his troops, Napoleon was able to defeat the opposing Russian and Austrian troops that outnumbered them by more than 10,000 men. These battles would be known as the Napoleonic Wars, as Napoleon and the French Empire had been a battle of shifting powers, mainly against Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. By the time 1809 rolled around, Napoleon had conquered a vast majority of Europe, from the Italian peninsula all the way up to the Netherlands and Germany. Napoleon's dreams of making France an empire similar to the ancient Romans and unifying Europe under the French flag were becoming true because of his elite skills in warfare and political strategy. As stated before, Napoleon wanted to create a dynasty that would lead the French Empire. So in 1810, Napoleon married a woman named Mary Louise, the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. This was because Napoleon's previous wife, Josephine, couldn't bear any more children due to infertility. Thus, a year later, in 1811, Mary Louise gave birth to Napoleon II. As the Napoleon Wars raged on and affected all parts of the world, including the United States, one of Napoleon's greatest enemies was Great Britain. Earlier in the war, French forces had tried to fight Britain in naval warfare, specifically in the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, but this proved to be ineffective as Britain had the biggest and greatest naval force in the world at the time and dominated the opposing French and Spanish forces. This was the reason that Napoleon chose to focus on land battles, in which he was proven more successful. But he also knew that if he couldn't defeat Britain in naval naval warfare, he could bring them down economically. Thus, in 1806, Napoleon had made the continental system. This system had stated that any nations/states occupied by France or allied with them could not trade with Britain whatsoever. It was a plan to isolate Britain and weaken them economically. By the time 1812 rolled by, almost all of Western Europe was forced under this continental system and made to leave Britain on its own, all of which except Tsar Alexander I and his country of Russia. This was due to Russia suffering a severe economic drop, as Britain was a big part of their economy at the time. Due to this retaliation, Napoleon, at the ignorance of his own closest advisors, decided to launch a full-scale invasion of Russia. And just like another famous European leader that would come after Napoleon, invading Russia would prove to be futile and ultimately lead to Napoleon's sad downfall. The invasion of Russia by Napoleon and his forces would prove to be a failure, as although they had made it to Moscow, they would find the city abandoned. And with the combined factors of cold weather, long-distance traveling, and starvation, this invasion would become one of the greatest military disasters in history, as it resulted in more than 200,000 deaths. Seeing this defeat, Napoleon's enemies both within the French lands and out had decided in joint effort to team up against him. Although Napoleon led a campaign against his enemies in an attempt to stop them, it would prove to be futile, as in October of 1913, the Battle of Leipzig would take place. With the combined strength of Austrian, Prussian, Swedish, and Russian forces led by Tsar Alexander I and Karl von Schwarzenberg, the French forces would be backed into a corner and defeated by this coalition. This was all after the invasion of Russia and a failed attempt to take over Britain. This battle would be the final straw to break the camel's back and force Napoleon to abandon his lifelong dream of conquering all of Europe, and would be pursued by the coalition army of the combined nations. Eventually, in March of 1814, the coalition army would seize control of Paris. Only a few days after this, in April, Napoleon would finally be caught and forced to abdicate his throne as emperor and forced into exile on the Italian island of Elba by an agreement called the Treaty of Fontainebleau. Now, this exile would not be the very last of Napoleon. After staying on Elba for around 10 months, Napoleon's strong belief in his destiny for greatness put into him a fear that he would die in obscurity. And with some loopholes in the treaty and the need to be in France, Napoleon talked to his mother, who supported his deep desire to reclaim what was once lost, as she allegedly told him to, quote, fulfill your destiny. With the help of some loyalists and a well-disguised fleet of ships, Napoleon and more than 1,000 others had escaped Elba and would return back to France. In France, Napoleon would march towards Paris and take back his throne from King Louis XVIII for around 110 days or so. But this short restoration of power would come to an end at what is widely considered the true end of the Napoleonic Wars. The Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815, Napoleon and his French forces would be defeated at the hands of the coalition. The very groups of countries that Napoleon once held or posed dominance towards, he would again, and for the last time, be forced to abdicate his throne, and for the rest of his days be exiled for good on the South Atlantic island of St. Helena. On May 5th, 1821, the once famous and powerful Napoleon, now a fraction of his former self, would die of stomach cancer. By the end of his life, during the final days in St. Helena, Napoleon was broken and lost. He had the entire world in his grasp and lost it all. His downfall within itself also serves as a different lesson of wanting far too much and reaching too far, similar to the story of Icarus. But the lesson I want to get from Napoleon is his strong-held belief in the idea that he was destined for greatness. The legacy of Napoleon had its good sides and bad sides, but it is undeniable that he was one of the greatest European leaders in history. Napoleon was born into a family of middle-class aristocrats on an island that barely became French territory. He spoke Corsican as his native language and was one of 8 children. Nobody would have predicted that level of success that he achieved, but all of it came from his own beliefs. He set out to conquer Europe and believed that it was destiny from God that he would be successful. It goes back to the basic idea that if we believe in something, then it can happen. To say and know you want to be successful or achieve something is far different from believing it. Napoleon, for most of his life, held the pen of his life story and dictated exactly what he was going to do, simply because he deemed it as a divine fate. In the words of the man himself, "Destiny urges me to a goal of which I am ignorant. Until that goal is attained, I am invulnerable and unassailable. When destiny has accomplished her purpose in me, a fly may suffice to destroy me." Thank you guys for watching this episode of Jumla Historia. This by far is one of my longest videos, so if you enjoyed what you saw, consider liking and subscribing. I also have a new channel going up that has to do more with my personal martial arts journey and just martial arts in general, called Jumla Martial Arts. If you're interested in that, you can check it out and the link will be in the bio. That'll be all for this one, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.